Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college football, all things Giants football. I'm your co-host Sal, here with my buddy Monty. What's going on, man?
What's going on, dude? We hired a special teams coordinator.
Yes, we did. It's an exciting time to be a Giants fan.
Big
Michael
news.
Gabriel, big news. This is all we got. Michael Gabriel. The best part of this news. So this guy just quickly was an assistant special teams coach for the Jets. Came out of UCLA. The most exciting thing to me is that his name sounds like it's of Egyptian heritage. So to me, I smell two comp picks in 2 years when he's named head coach of some team. So when he's named head coach
next
of
Harbaugh.
Oh yeah. Like this when he takes over for John Harbaugh, when John Harbaugh retires in 2 years, this guy's gonna be amazing. He's gonna get his two comp picks. But that's and we got our guys Mike Kafka doing his second round of interviews in Seattle. Puerto Rican legend Mike Kafka, that is.
Hey, shout out his Puerto Rican heritage.
That's two more comp picks, baby. get that job, Mike. Good luck. And Brendan Brown, probably the most promising of our candidates to potentially get a job in his second round of interviews that have been completed with the LA Chargers to work alongside Jim Harbaugh. And apparently he's down to like the finalists. I think they're down to basically two guys at this point. It sounds like it's Brendan Brown and Joel Ortiz. Oh, I guess Ed Dodds is the other one, right? It's the three of them.
Was he? I don't know. I feel like I heard one, but I haven't heard about if Ed Dodds got a second interview or not.
I think he might have, but it does sound like it's down to at least those two. So Brown's definitely got a legit shot to win his first head coaching gig, and I'm definitely rooting for that guy. Like I am absolutely rooting for him, not
It'd
just
be
for
a
the comp picks.
fantastic landing spot for him.
It's a great spot. Of course, we would get comp picks for him, which would be great, including a third this year. But no, I think for a young guy who's inexperienced, going to get your first job working alongside a guy like Jim Harbaugh, who's been around the block, who understands what he's looking for in personnel, and it's sort of like a nice umbrella to be part of, you know.
And having your quarterback already figured out, so that's some job security right there.
Having a top quarterback in the NFL, one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL, like already locked into your organization, and all you got to do is build around him. That's a sweet kind of gig.
Yeah, it's not sending him to like Carolina to die for a couple third round picks. We're sending him off to LA to thrive.
That's right. Of course, their organization's kind of in hell right now. They have to reload. They're gonna have to spend a year just cleaning house, but I think that's kind of understood over there. So,
yeah,
good luck, Brandon Brown. Good luck, Mike Kafka. Seriously, I hope you guys both get the job. Hate to lose you guys. But I'd rather lose you guys and get some comp picks if I'm going to do that.
And just fire you down the road.
Yeah, or just have you leave us for a lateral job, Mike Kafka, which I think was a very real possibility. We'll see more on that. But today is our fourth and final installment of our Senior Bowl preview. So we got through it, man. This is it. I know this is not the most thrilling set of pods for our loyal listeners, but Senior Bowl is right around the corner. It's about a week away. We wanted to get these done.
Plummeted a little bit.
Our views plummeted. I don't blame people. I think they're a little worn out. That's okay. Yeah. That's what we do here. We plow through this for you guys so you can listen to it whenever you want. But as a recap, we have already done 30 player reviews, 20 on defense, 10 on offense. We're going to finish off with 10 offensive player reviews today. Get through 10 guys we thought were interesting to discuss at a pretty solid Senior Bowl class. And then hopefully you guys have a framework of some understanding of these players, a little bit of introduction as you go into the Senior Bowl stuff. And if you have more, a little bit more insight into it, it might make for better discussions when we all talk about it afterwards. But that's kind of the intro here. Do you have any other thoughts before we get started here?
No, man, let's get into it. We're bound to draft one of these guys. So let's get down to our last 10. Hopefully get one of these 40.
We'll get somebody. All right, let's start with our first review. And we're going directly to the quarterbacks, and it's quarterback Bo Nix from Oregon. 6'2", 217 pounds, fifth-year senior, 4-star recruit. This year he had a 77.4% completion percentage, 4,508 passing yards, 45 touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions. He was a 2018 Elite 11 finalist in high school. He was originally at Auburn, for those who remember. He was a transfer to Oregon the last 2 years at Oregon and has done an amazing job resurrecting his career. We did review him obviously in one of our quarterback episodes, but Monty, to give our viewers a little bit of information about Bo Nix.
Yeah, man. Bo Nix. If you don't know who Bo Nix is, you don't watch college football because I mean this man has the most starts in college football history. He's been around for a fucking minute, guys. I mean, he's been started a lot of games, but not always a bad thing. I mean, I think sometimes people end up looking that as a negative thing, but to me, I think Bo Nix has really grown as a football player since his time at Auburn, now in Oregon, and he's since then he's to me as NFL ready as it gets. He is polished. We have our questions about him. If you listen to our us talk about him anywhere from our quarterback review to other times, we definitely have our questions about Bo Nix. But I do like Bo Nix. Like, let's not get this twisted. I still view him as at least a grade of like a round 1 to round 2. Like has somewhere around a round 1 grade for me as a quarterback. It's just I went back and watched him, and he does impress me, especially between the numbers. And in college football, that's pretty wide. So, yeah, really good ball placement, and I noticed that just in general, like placing the ball to set up to keep guys on the run, but also just like shield the ball away from defenders. He's a really good processor post snap to see that type of stuff, but also pre snap. I thought he was a really good knowledge pre snap. You can see him making adjustments. You can see him knowing exactly where to go with the ball before he even snaps the football. I mean, that's kind of the quick hitting offense he plays in. Um, I thought he was a guy who played really well, like on the move. That's kind of what that offense asked him to do. He would kind of take the ball, he'd run a bootleg, he'd run around the pocket a little bit, and he has a lot of athleticism. You can see him throw from different arm angles. You can see him, make throws on the run, avoid tackles. He's impressive in that sense. He can layer the ball well. He can fit into tight windows, kind of within right in front of him, like in like the short area. He has pretty good zip and can fit it in there. I thought his arm was good enough. I didn't think it was spectacular, and that's kind of my worry about him. Outside of just kind of these offensive concerns about like where they didn't ask him to do too much because that's the Oregon offense. If you enter like a Brian Dable offense where they really open up how he would look. But I don't think he's going to be a guy that you ask to stand in the pocket and deliver it all over the field. But when a more of a quick hitter offense working between the numbers, I think he's really good at that type of stuff. And I do think he can throw outside the numbers. The ball just tends to die a little bit on him. And I talked a good bit, but why don't you add a little bit to that, Sal? What else? Your kind of thoughts?
I think you nailed most of it. Like you, I went back and looked at this film again, and just with an open mind, thought, okay, what did I miss here the first time? Because I remember thinking he was good, but I wasn't overly thrilled watching him the first time. And I will say that I think sometimes we focus on what these kids don't do well too much, and we don't talk enough about what they do well. And I
Yeah.
went into it with that mindset this time, right? What Bo Nix does really well, as you mentioned, is I think he's probably the best processor of the class in terms of recognizing defenses, both pre and post snap. And I think he's a very quick processor. I think he sees the field as safeties and DBs shift. I think he diagnoses that pretty quickly on the field and makes good decisions. He's a very good decision maker on the field. Like he doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and that shows up in the stats. I think he was number 1 or something like that in college football this year in terms of turnover worthy plays as a quarterback.
Yes, he
Yeah,
was first in the
1%.
country.
Right. And I think that shows up on film. Like he rarely makes mistakes. He doesn't throw picks. He doesn't put the ball in harm's way very often. And I think that's an important trait, right? So he does that really well. I think he diagnoses plays really quickly and he slices and dices over the middle, short and intermediate range, outstanding. Really outstanding stuff, right? He has zip on his fastball in that range. Like he's in that
Exactly.
from behind the line of scrimmage, so I'd say about maybe 10 to 15 yards out, he's got zip. And
As long as it's like inside the numbers.
inside the numbers, in the middle of the field, like up to about 15 yards, he's throwing darts and he's
Mhm.
beating like tight coverage. Where his game and he has and for deep ball accuracy, he's actually pretty good. It's good touch passes. He puts the
Yes.
ball on back shoulders very nicely. I think he does some of those things very well. The criticism, as you mentioned, is I think, when he has to stand in the pocket and try to beat you outside the numbers, if the defense is taking away the middle of the field and they're kind of forcing him to go on the outside, he can get the ball there, but it definitely dies. Like there's a
Mhm.
little bit of arm strength issue there that I think shows up on film. I know some people rave about his arm strength, but to me, when I look at arm strength, I'm looking at those kinds of throws, and those balls just seem to sail a little bit, and they die, and I'm not terribly thrilled with that. Now, is that a huge issue? I don't know. So where does he fit? What does he do well? In my opinion, West Coast offense, Shanahan tree, McVay tree kind of offense. We were talking about this before we came on. Um, an interesting landing spot for him. So I think he's a winner. I think he's a day one starter. I think he fits in an offense that works like that. Raheem Morris was just hired as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Not Bill Belichick. Raheem Morris was coming from that Shanahan tree, McVay tree. He worked with Liam Cohen on the Rams staff last year in 2022. Liam Cohen was their offensive coordinator before he went back to Kentucky to be their OC. And he was the OC there a couple of years ago in Kentucky with that Will Levis offense with Wandell Robinson that was really dynamic. Um, if if whether it's Liam Cohen tapped to be the OC or somebody else from that McVay tree, I can on a team that's ready to win, and the Atlanta Falcons drafting eighth overall. It seems rich for Bo Nix, but I've been hearing Jeremiah talk about it. I can 100% see Bo Nix going in that territory to the Atlanta Falcons. That makes sense to me.
Lance Zierlein gave him a higher grade than he gave CJ Stroud last year. So there's that.
I mean, we can have our criticism of things he can't do, but what he can do very well fits in
Yeah.
certain teams and certain schemes really well.
Yes.
So if I had to predict a team that would be really interested in him right now, it might be with the hiring of Raheem Morris. It might actually be the Atlanta Falcons because they need either a veteran quarterback or they need a quarterback who can win now coming out of the draft. And I think Bo Nix fits that very nicely, especially if they're running like a McVay style system, which they sounds like they will be. So interesting. On the Giants, like you said, I have concerns about him fitting in a more vertical offense, and I'll just leave it at that. I think he can. You have to design an offense around him that's short game oriented. I think he can be great in that. If you're asking him to stretch the field, if you're asking him to utilize a guy like Jalen Hyatt, maybe not the best way to do it. So
Yeah.
that's what I
I
got on Bo Nix. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought you put that really well where, I definitely went into last time, like, looking, like, what guys look different, and, like, I don't think the ball looks different coming off of Bo Nix's hands like it does, like, a
Mhm.
JJ McCarthy. That's excited me a little more about a guy like JJ McCarthy. The ball pops off his hand. I thought the ball looks fine coming off his hand, especially in that short area, but it just doesn't have that same, like, pop, but, like, what he does do though is like these way he can like move and throw off platform and throw from different arm angles, I think is really impressive. Um and that's definitely something I didn't like appreciate as much because I kind of looked at his limitations, but within what he does do, he does that very well. He's a former baseball player and that I think shows to me. I think he
Yeah.
probably was a shortstop, and because he plays like one when when he's out there trying to make these throws. So, yeah, man, I like Bo Nix. If we came back and took him at the end of the first round, second round, I wouldn't hate it. I don't love it because I don't think you can run what Brian Dable wants to do. But if they're willing to change up the offense to fit their quarterback, then I think he's a good player.
I agree.
Um, one
Why
last
don't
thing I just
we?
want to
Oh, good. No.
touch on before we do is just throw a couple stats there. He had a 92.7 passing grade, 95.5 deep grade, 91.2 under pressure. Didn't see a lot of pressure. One of
Yeah.
the best offensive lines in the country, but still noteworthy. 85.4 completion percentage, first in adjusted completion percentage, first in the country. Very, very impressive number. Um, but only a 4.1% big time throw rate, which we've talked about before, isn't a perfect number stat. It's hard to describe, but basically think of it like, at Sunday throws. And so he does not make a lot of those at a high percentage in college. He was first in screen yards. Again, that offense, 745 yards, number one in the country. And average time to throw 2.44 seconds. So he got that ball out quickly. Was 14th in the country. So just some stats there. But also one thing I want to throw out to his credit, shout out Bo Nix. It's not as popular anymore. He went and played in his bowl game when he really didn't need to against Liberty. I don't think anybody expected him to play in that game, and he did. That's something that I don't fault anybody for not playing in their bowl games, but I definitely give him credit for going out and playing with his team one last time. So shout out Bo Nix.
All right, let's go to the next guy, man.
All right, we're gonna talk about your guy here, so I'll lead it into it. All right, Michael Penix out of Washington, 6'3", 213 pounds. He was a 3-star recruit. He's a 6-year player. He transferred from Indiana. He had a 65.4 completion percentage, 4,903 yards, 36 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. He played baseball and ran track in high school. Prior to his injury in 2021, he led the Big Ten in passing yards and touchdowns. So he did have some stats at Big Ten at Indiana despite the injuries. But yeah, he ended up deciding to play in the Senior Bowl, which surprised me a little bit. With he was getting beat up there a little bit in that championship game, and that being so recent, I really didn't expect this, but I'm happy we get him here. It's going to be fun to watch. So tell us a little bit more about your guy, Michael Penix.
I love Michael Penix Jr. You guys all know that by now. He's a special thrower of the football, and that's how I would describe him. I think very different than Bo Nix. This guy has an absolute cannon of an arm, and he can throw this ball. He can put that ball anywhere on the field that he wants to, and he can put it there with zip. He can put it there with touch. He can throw the ball outside the numbers. He can throw it over the middle. He can throw the deep ball. He shows advanced passing mechanics. He shows, well, maybe not mechanics, advanced passing ability with his arm strength and his arm talent. He can really spin it. You've seen the guy challenge DBs all over the field. He reads leverage very well when you watch him. He goes through his progressions, much like Bo Nix. He does go through his progressions, and he tends to have a very good feel for where leverage is going to be favorable, and he leads his receivers into those places. And you see him make throws as before they develop. It's something I look for in these quarterbacks. Like, can they see that play develop before, like, the guy goes into the break, before it becomes obvious? He does a lot of that. He does manipulate safeties with his eyes, something I mentioned during our quarterback episode, which I'm really impressed by. Tracks the safety that's watching him, and he holds them to the last second, and then he throws to a side where he's kind of manipulated them out of, and he creates openings for his receivers. He's really outstanding that way. Where he struggles, I think we've talked about this, that he has good, not necessarily elite accuracy. He doesn't have like pinhole accuracy, but he's got what we refer to as doorknob accuracy or door accuracy. I think that he does tend to be a little bit less athletic than some of his peers. He shows that. I think injuries have played a role. Obviously, he has a checkered injury history, which is what's holding him back, I think, in the eyes of a lot of NFL evaluators. He's not a runner, not naturally at least. He's more of a throwback pocket passer, think like Ben Roethlisberger type guy. Like, he can move if he needs to, but he doesn't want to. I think he prefers to stay in the pocket. He's not a statue back there. He's got good footwork. He manipulates the pocket beautifully. He slides around and helps his offensive line amazingly well. He doesn't take sacks, much like Bo Nix. He only had a 7.6% pressure to sack rate, gets the ball out quick in about 2.6 seconds. Where he's different is he's a more of a deep ball thrower, and Nix is a short ball guy. Nix was, like, a lot of his production came from screens, whereas Penix's production came from vertical passing game, deep yards. He was number one in the country in deep yards with 1,787 yards. And I think, what did you say? Nix had like a 4% big time throw rate. Penix had a 7.1% big time throw rate. That was 14th best in the country. So he's a more of a Sunday throw guy. And his adjusted completion percentage not as high as Nix in the 80s, but he's at 74%, that's requisite. That's where you want to be, in the 70s. So bottom line is I think he's an outstanding prospect. Not doesn't have the athleticism in terms of running as some of these other guys, and obviously has an injury history that's going to hold him back. But for vertical passing offense, let's talk about what he does well, right? Big arm, and he's ideal for a vertical passing offense. Are we moving to a vertical passing offense with Brian Dable seemingly taking over play calling? I suspect we are. I think that's what they want to do. So I think we shouldn't discount the possibility of the Giants being interested in Michael Penix Jr. for that reason. So that's what I got on him. What other thoughts do you have on Mike?
Yeah, I mean, and look, this is as a team that's rumoredly was into Hendon Hooker, who ran a kind of a vertical style offense in college. Maybe there's something there to that. You know, I think you said it. I've said it to you before. He's a throwback. That's truly who he is. He reminds me of quarterbacks of the 2000s. He's the Big Bens, he's the Eli's, he's the Philip Rivers, he's the big guy who doesn't necessarily like want to run it. But he manipulates the pocket very well. It's not. He's probably more athletic than those guys, but it doesn't even really matter because that's not what he's really interested in doing. Um, my concern is his struggles as a passer come when he's moved off the spot, with the exception of that Texas game. Texas in the playoffs was the not just the best game I've ever seen Michael Penix play. That was one of the best games I saw any quarterback play in college football this year. He was phenomenal. He was whenever they have a really good defensive front there at Texas. We've talked about a couple of those guys for these Senior Bowls previews, and when he got moved off the spot, he was still putting these balls with pinpoint accuracy. The thing is about Michael Penix, he has an arm to stand in there and throw the ball anywhere he wants in the field, and he fucking knows it. He has the confidence to do it. I think he'd be perfect in like a Bruce Arians type offense. I also think he'd fit a Brian Dable offense as well. Brian Dable seems to be evolving where he really likes to have the mobile runner. I don't think he needs that. I think that's just where he's moved. But I think he also fits this offense. But that Bruce Arians grip it and rip it offense, I think he would fit that perfectly. He is somebody who I definitely like. I definitely shy away more than you from the guys who lack some of that mobility, which is some of my concerns with him. But I do think he is a very good player. The only other thing I would throw it, I'd say that he does. We've talked about this a bunch of times. There's a two-sided things where with the anticipatory stuff, like some of that comes where he is just holding these safeties, and he knows he has the arm talent to wait, and he takes the shots. But I definitely, looking a little bit more, I could see some times where on like earlier, like quicker routes, he was still later to the passes than I'd ideally want him to be. I think probably some of it always comes back to he has just such great arm talent that it feels like it's something he's never had to do. But when he gets to the NFL, anticipation is definitely something that he has to continue to improve. I think the game's just going to get faster for him, and I don't think that's going to be a problem for him to catch up the speed, but it's just something that I definitely still think is a place for improvement. But kid can fucking spin the football.
Yeah, and we'll get into the scenarios again. But I'll close it out by saying this: if the Giants are not able to find their way to get a quarterback at the top of the first round, and they don't feel comfortable taking one at 6, and they decide maybe to either take a playmaker at 6 or whatever and play the board, Michael Penix Jr. all of a sudden becomes one of the most, if not the most attractive option that they can, swing back around into the first or at the top of the second and get. So pay attention to where he goes because he may very well be in play for the Giants.
Agreed. I think he's and look, we have another exciting thing. I don't know if we've talked about this on here yet or not. Jay Teenery, our quarterback coach. He is the offensive coordinator for both Bo Nix and Michael Penix. They are both on the national team working, and he's working as their offensive coordinator. So he's going to get a hands-on work with both these quarterbacks, and it's going to be invaluable for this evaluation.
It's something I appreciate. All right, we spent about 20 minutes on these two, and we're going to try to speed it up with the other guys. But
Those
these
are
are
the
the
quarterbacks.
quarterback.
Those are the fun
But
ones.
you know what? These guys might be giants, so it was worth talking about.
Yeah, I agree.
A lot of scenarios we have to talk about. But this episode, I think it was worth renewing our interest in them. So we talk about what they do well, as opposed to just focusing on what they don't do well, right? And where their strengths are. Let's go to our third player. I'm going to introduce him here. Our third player is Kimani Vidal, the running back out of Troy. I believe that's where Lawrence Tynes went to school, if I'm not mistaken, right? Another
That
famous
sounds
Giants
right.
alum. 5'8", 215 yards, 3-star recruit, fourth-year player. This year he had 1,661 rushing yards, 14 touchdowns, 5.6 yards per carry. He also had another 201 yards in the air receiving and a touchdown. Monty, tell me about Kimani Vidal.
Kimani Vidal, and also shout out Troy. Neil Brown, West Virginia's coach, came from Troy. There you go.
Did we have another? I feel like we had somebody else. Was it OC? Did OC go there?
I think you're right. I think OC did go there. I think you're right.
OC did go. Yeah, he went to Troy. Yep.
There you go. Shout out OC.
Yeah, I don't know how I forgot about OC, but then I mentioned.
So we're gonna get another player from Troy here.
Yeah, he's such a giant. This guy's such a giant. Go ahead. Tell us about this future giant.
So I'll say I had no idea anything about this guy. I was just looking at Senior Bowl running backs, trying to figure out a good guy to look at. He was decently high up on some big boards, not super high, but like in the hundreds of some sort. And dude, this guy he's a baller, man. He has pretty solid bursts, but he is a tackle breaker is really the best way to describe him. He has really fucking good footwork. He's a patient runner who kind of lets blocks develop in front of him. He has really good contact balance. Like I constantly see him getting knocked around and kind of just holding his feet and keeping up his pace as a runner. He fights for extra yards. He has a really good stiff arm. I consistently saw him use. He's a good receiving threat. I mean, you mentioned he had like 200 yards receiving. I saw him constantly be used in the receiving games. I really liked him. I mean, if we look, anybody here who's watching right now and can see the PFF grades, they're very impressive. 93.2 rushing grade, 91.8 gap grade, 118.9 elusive grade. But really, what I want to focus on right now, 94 missed tackles forced. That was second in the country. This is one of my favorite stats to look at, is how well that these running backs can force missed tackles. We talked about that a little bit with Taj Brooks when we were hoping he was going to declare. It's something that translates really well to the NFL level. It's just guys who can force missed tackles will continue to do that. And not only that, that pairs up with yards after contact, which was tied for second in the country with 1,056. He had over 1,000 yards after contact. I mean, ridiculously impressive. The average 3.58 yards after contact per attempt. Really good player. But what else do you want to tell us about Kimani Vidal, Sal?
Not a ton. I think the way I looked at him was like he's a guy who has initial burst. Like he's a very good runner. Like I think he shows some patience to let his blocks develop. That's what I saw. Like he was a good runner. He'd let the blocks develop, and then he would hit the holes. I think something we pointed out that he does a little bit negatively is he tends to have an instinct to just kind of drift to the outside all the time. Like his instinct is to take the ball and drift to the outside of the play, not necessarily just hit the hole right away. Part of that I thought was him watching the blocks develop, but he did do that. Now, when he starts taking off, his burst is very impressive. Like once he starts moving, like he's like an immediate freight train. He has a lot of immediate acceleration, and you see that in the way he handles contact. Like he bowls into people, and he knocks them over, and he pushes forward for extra yards. He has very good contact balance. I think if there's a negative in his game, once he gets into the open field and he starts running, his lack of like multiple gears shows up. Like he'll run, and then you see everybody else catch up to him very quickly. So I don't think he has like elite runaway speed. I think he's a guy that will produce explosive plays through his burst and vision. and he'll get some yardage on the outside. He'll, either on the outside or through a good gap run, but he's not. I don't think he's a home run hitter. I think he's just a solid runner. Like a guy who's going to get you some dirty yards. A guy who's going to get you some explosive energy type yards. He's a powerful runner. He gives you like that aggressive runner feel, but he's not a home runner hitter. He's not like, not that it's a fair comparison, but 2018 Saquon Barkley, when he got room, he was gone. Like nobody's catching him. This guy's going to get caught from behind. So really solid player. I think, good day three kind of player, a very, very important type of player in your running back room by committee, if that's where we're headed. So I liked him a
Yep.
lot, man. I think he's a solid pick. I think right now PFF has him graded like, let me see, where do they have him on their big board? It was like in the 146. So I don't think he's going to rise much higher than that. I think we're looking at like a fourth, fifth round kind of grade for this guy, and that's probably where he lands. So if they want him, I think he'll be right in that territory.
Yeah, maybe we'll hit on our 5th round running back this year if we take Kimani Vidal.
I'm not giving up on Eric Gray, even though I didn't love the pick at the time. I think
Yeah.
he could be part of a good committee. And like you said, this guy's a good receiver. He's a 3 down back. I mean, that's something I noticed. That he can be a 3 down back with his receiving ability. So solid player.
He was a
Anything
decent
else?
blocker
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yep, he's a good blocker. All right. Let's go on to the next side. You want to introduce our first receiver of the batch?
Yep. We got a couple freak list guys coming up here, and this was a my guy on our wide receiver episode, which was our first ever He's a Giant episode. So shout out Malachi Corley out of Western Kentucky, 5'11", 220 pounds. Thick guy. It was a 2-star cornerback recruit. He's a 4th-year player. He had 79 receptions for 984 yards and 11 touchdowns this year. He actually came in as a running back. I want to give you some of his freak list numbers here real quick before I hand it off. He hit 23 miles per hour on GPS. He reportedly ran a 4.4340 this summer, 408 shuttle, 355 bench press. Just very, very good athlete. And all that shows up on tape. But why don't you talk to us a little bit about Malachi Corley?
Corley is the guy that we called the guy who Debo'd, who was more Debo than Debo was Debo. When we introduced him, because he plays like Debo Samuel at South Carolina and in the NFL. All screens all day. Just get the ball in his hand and watch him bowl people over. Impossible to drag down. He's yoked up, strong as hell, and he just keeps moving. He's fast, he's shifty, and he's strong as shit. So he's an incredible athlete with the ball in his hand. Um, last year he had about 76% of his yards in yak, which is nuts. This year he was down a little, but he was still at 69% of his yards in yak. He didn't force as many missed tackles this year. He was at 40 last year, 15 this year. I think his utilization went down a little bit in that offense this year. I'm not sure why. And if there's anything, again, we're focusing on the positives, but if you want to point out some of the negatives, I think his route running is still very, very, very like rudimentary, and it doesn't have a diverse route tree. He kind of rounds out his routes. It's a very limited route tree. Screens, runs to the flat, short crossers, things like that. Like nothing more advanced than that on a consistent basis. Now, is that the way they just use him, or is that what he can do? I don't know. But how do I see him? I see him as a freak athlete, powerful athlete, probably going to test very, very well, and he's going to be very impressive at the combine. And at minimum, you put him on your offense and you just get the ball to him, he's going to make things happen. He's a very, very good weapon gadget type guy at minimum, and maybe with the upside to develop into more of a route runner the way Debo Samuel did. So I think his value fell a little bit this year with his production drop. He was being mocked early, and the way too early, like preseason type stuff. I think he had grades of being like in the top 40 of the class.
Mhm.
He's definitely
Yeah,
not there now.
we talked about him like potentially playing himself in the first round when we
Right.
did this.
I personally think he's played himself into the back end of the third round at this point, or maybe even day three. Like I know you don't agree with that because of his
Mhm.
athletic testing, but I do it's a good class up top. So I don't know where he's going, but if you get a guy like this, you're getting him because he's just a playmaker with the
Yeah.
ball in his hands. Not much before then. So that's what I got on him. I did mention I thought he was a victim of very bad quarterback play at Western Kentucky this year, and I think that limits our evaluation somewhat.
Yeah. I'll say, yeah, I mean, as far as where he's going, I could easily see him fall in the third round, but I think he'll get picked up quickly. We'll see. I think he's a player that the NFL looks for. He's a rare player. He's a true running back who plays wide receiver. He has ridiculous contact balance, and he is a physical runner. Like, he wants to run through you, and that's where the Debo comps come from. People bring up the Debo comp a lot, and I don't think it's fair most time. Like, people brought up like Kadarius Toney, and they just say Debo Samuel when they're talking about like running backs who offer yak. But what made Debo special is, I mean, where his Debo name came from. He's a fucking bully on the football field, and I mean that's what Malachi Corley is. He's a bully. He wants to run you over. I'll say his 2022 film and you go look up his highlight tape. Some of the most fun like tape I've watched of a player. Like, he is just so much. I mean, he broke 40 tackles. 40 tackles he missed. And like this year 15. It showed. He wasn't bad this year, but he didn't look like the player where I was like, wow, this is a special football player. He didn't look like this is the next Debo as much. But he looked like where you're gonna see the comps, but it looks more like of the unfair comp type level. But I yeah, I still think he's going to be a very good player. The Senior Bowl is gonna be interesting for him. We're gonna see if he can start to show that he's more of a route runner here, because we already know he offers after the catch. Like, let's see what he can do going one-on-one with some of these defensive backs. He's definitely a guy I'm gonna keep an eye on. He has the movement ability to, really show up here. They don't ask him to do it. I mean, he was number 1 in screen yards in the country, 330. He was number 1 last year, and they didn't even use him as much this year. So, he is 2.78 yards per route run, pretty solid. Contested catch rate was only 23.5, not good. But I mean, he's going to be a guy that you're going to. Again, we talked about it. He's a perfect Shanahan system guy. You're going to scheme him into space. You're going to ask him to break tackles, and he's going to be great at that. I'm excited to see Malachi Corley in NFL. I think he's going to be a guy that sticks around, and a lot of teams are going to be happy to have around. I would happily, if we take Malachi Corley at the top of the third round, I think he's the guy you can always find a spot for on a team. He's a very, very good football player. But that's all I really have on him.
That's it. I think it's a good breakdown.
All right.
Let's go to our next guy, our second receiver on the list. I'll introduce him. It's Roman Wilson from the University of Michigan. 6 feet tall, 192 pounds, 4-star recruit coming out of high school. He is a fourth-year player. This year, he had 48 receptions for 789 yards and 12 touchdowns. A lot of touchdowns. He was a track star coming out of high school. He ran a 4.37 40 time at the Nike Open in 2019. And apparently he ran a 4.33 40 out of a 2-point stance, which is 94th percentile. He has some elite testing numbers. Is as per usual, all like the Michigan guys, their 3-cone numbers are insane. He broke the combine record that would be the combine record at 6.20 seconds. We've joked about how their 3 cones might be a little bit closer than everybody else's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
3.77
can't claim to break the record every single year and then just not do it.
Exactly. 3.77 second shuttle time, 10.76 60-yard shuttle time. All these are like elite 99, 96 percentile type numbers, and 2.22 plyo stairs, which was the best on the team. But tell us about Roman Wilson, Monty.
Yeah, man, he's a freak athlete, and regardless if they're a little bit close, he's still gonna run probably a ridiculous 3-cone. Probably isn't gonna break the 3-cone record by like 0.3 of a second or something like that. Something insane. He was way over. But one thing else add in here, I thought they did a lot of coverage on Michigan obviously going into the national championship. That was pretty cool. Is that then he's from Hawaii, and because he wasn't getting noticed at his school, he decided to go to a high school on another island. And every single day, he traveled by plane to go to high school, go to football practice, and then traveled by plane back to his island. So, like, the commitment this guy had to make it to the NFL is ridiculous. He is a really, really good athlete. One of the first things that popped off the tape to me before we even go into him as a like a receiver is, with that Michigan offense, very run heavy. He is very involved in that. He is a very good run blocker for a wide receiver, especially not that big of a guy. He's kind of got that, like, how good of a blocker like Sterling Shepard was for us. He's got some of that. He's going to help contribute there, which coaches are going to love. He's a really fluid athlete. He had really fluid hips, and he was quick in and out of his breaks. Um, he he had really good feet. Especially, he would line up against a D back and defensive back, and he'd get a release right off the line of scrimmage on those guys because of how talented he was with his feet. He's definitely more of a slot guy, but he is. I think he could play some outside versatility in the NFL. Um, but yeah, why don't you tell us some of your thoughts on Roman Wilson?
I don't have a ton to add. I would just say that he's a useful player. He's a very good athlete. He's fast, and I think he runs good routes. I don't think there's anything spectacular about Roman Wilson, but I think he's the kind of guy that will be a very productive third or fourth wide receiver in the NFL. I can see. I don't know if he's like a number two receiver type, or certainly not number one in my opinion. But I think um, he's just a solid player. Like, you put him on your team, he can play a lot in the slot. He can run good routes. He can get you a lot of yak because he's. I think he has the speed and athleticism to do that for you. Um, and run. We had talked about, like, where do we project him. I think you mentioned before we started the pod, thinking of him as something like a Curtis Samuel, a type. And I think that's a good comp. A guy who can run around and do jet sweeps and run short routes and be productive for your team.
Less of the
Um,
like lineup in the backfield like Curtis Samuel has like a running back who's not like a tackle breaker like him, but as far as like as a wide receiver.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's a very good comp to consider. So, useful player. If you're a team looking for a wide receiver one, I don't think he's that. If you're looking out to round out your wide receiver room with complementary players who can run good routes and come in and really, stress defenses, I think he's exactly that. So, I think he was also used in special teams, if I'm not mistaken. But um, basically, a useful, good football player is how I look at him. I think a solid late day two, early day three kind of guy. He might fall to day three. We'll see. I think he's probably going somewhere in the third round.
He has really good hands too. Only one drop on the entire season this year, and he made some pretty incredible catches. He had one verse, I think it was Nebraska, where he like went up over a guy to make a catch. He was definitely the really only receiving weapon in that wide receiver room for Michigan this year. Like you said, he's an interesting player. Where although he's primarily a slot guy, and this is kind of where we came up with the Curtis Samuel comp, is that you can even mention Sterling Shepard for this, but he's a better athlete than he is, in my opinion. He's a guy that might be a slot guy, but I see ultimately as he continues to improve as a route runner, I don't think he's super nuanced at this point, but he's still like, I see all the ability in the world to continue to improve there. That with his size and athleticism and his route running ability, you see no reason he can't also play on the outside in addition to the slot. I like Roman Wilson. I really do. I would have no problem adding this guy's room. I think I think as once this wide receiver depth starts to dwindle down, he's definitely one of the guys that I constantly see on in these mock draft simulators, things like that. It's like where he's still popping for me because I think
Yeah, he's hanging around that third, fourth round territory.
yeah, with his athleticism, I think he can be a good player in the NFL.
Awesome. All right, you want to jump into the next guy?
Yep, let's do it. All right. This was a guy that you advocated to get onto this list, and I know you're a fan of Jamari Thrash out of Louisville. He's 6'1", 185 pounds. Skinnier guy. He's was a 3-star recruit. He's a 5th-year player. He had 63 receptions this year for 858 yards and 6 touchdowns. Sal, tell us about Jamari Thrash.
Yeah, and I didn't pick Jamari Thrash because he had this incredibly productive year. I picked Jamari Thrash because when you watch Jamari Thrash play, I think he's a lot better than his numbers indicate. And I think you agreed when you watched him. Like he's a very, very good route runner. Um, he's plenty fast. He runs solid routes. He gets a lot of separation. I mean, he seems like he's open a lot. Ball never comes his way. Like, I don't know what's going on over there. I feel like there were many missed opportunities by the quarterback at Louisville. I'm not sure what was going on in that offense, but this is a guy who I felt could have been a lot more productive if the ball came his way because he was getting separation. He was running clean routes. And he's pretty fast. So I think I liked a lot of the route running and the physical aspects of his game. He didn't have the production he could have had. But I do think there are, I think that there are some limitations to his game. When you mentioned his skinny frame, he's only 180 pounds or so at 6'1", 6'2". And I think that will matter at the NFL level. He's not great at contested catches. It was part of a paltry number. He had a 15% contested catch rate this year, which is not great. 11% drop rate, which is not great. So some of those numbers argue against him being a good outside receiver. But then again, we saw Roma Dunze have numbers like that last year, and he turned it up. Not comparing him to Roma Dunze as a player, but I'm just saying players can fix those things, To me, it's all about, are you a good route runner? I mean, we talk about this. Like, one of the traits you really want to bet on a wide receiver coming out of college is, can you be a really good route runner? And if I'm sticking true to that mantra, and I think Jamari Thrash is a guy I would bet on. I don't think he's going to be taken early in the draft. I think he's kind of another late day 2, maybe early day 3 kind of guy. But I think he's a guy you would consider taking just because he does all the things you want a receiver to do in terms of getting separation, having good speed, getting in a position where the ball, if thrown his way, would give a nice target for his quarterback. So that's kind of what I like about him. I think I'm projecting him more than I'm seeing.
So yeah, I definitely you mentioned with Corley, you could see him going day 3. I'm more of a day 3 guy. I'm pretty solidly him with Jamari Thrash, but I did like him. I agree. I think he's a good route runner. I think he's a smooth player. Like I said, he's solid after the catch. One thing I noticed, he's really good at comeback routes. I consistently, when he was running that, I saw him create a lot of separation and kind of just leave defensive backs in his dust. And was a big part of his game there. I saw he could go up and go get balls. But I mentioned to you as a comp for this, I see him similarly. I don't like him as much as I liked this guy, but I see him similar Van Jefferson. Van Jefferson was kind of a taller, skinnier guy who was a really good route runner out of the University of Florida. And I think that's a decent comp for him. Van Jefferson went 2nd round, to be fair. So I did like him a lot coming out, and he was a good route runner, just like Jamari Thrash is. I think he was a little bit better. But I see them in a similar light. Just Jamari Thrash is kind of a little bit worse version of it. But I think he's going to be a guy who, all these guys, Corley, a really good athlete. Roman Wilson, really good athlete who kind of runs a little bit better routes than Corley. And then Thrash, who's not quite the athlete those guys are, but is best route runner probably out of 3. It's gonna be interesting seeing all these guys in one-on-ones here at the Senior Bowl.
I agree. All right, let's go to the next side. That concludes our receivers. So we got one tight end in the group, and we chose a really, really exciting playmaking tight end. No, we didn't. We selected AJ Barner from Michigan. So, this one is going to take 3 minutes, I promise you, including my introduction. 6'6", 251 pounds. He was a 3-star recruit. He's a 4th-year player at Michigan. 22 receptions, 249 yards, 1 touchdown. He was a transfer from Indiana. Monty, give us the quick rundown on AJ Barner.
Really good blocker. Really good blocker. He's a good run blocker. He's also a good pass blocker. He generally helped in both. They kept him in.
Did you mention that he can block well?
I don't know if I did yet, but if you guys didn't hear, he's a good blocker. I would know that he's a good pass blocker. That's something that's clearly evident because they didn't let him go out and catch passes very often. They kept him in the block. He was good at it. Look, I think a lot with tight ends in general is how they test at the combine. I don't know what kind of athlete AJ Barner is. He didn't pop off the page as like a terrible athlete or like a great athlete. So, if he goes to the combine and tests really well, a lot of these, college tight ends is projections. And if he tests well, he could be like a second round pick because he's such a good blocker. Yeah, we already know that and be like, hey, I can use this athleticism and I can use him as a receiver. But if he doesn't test well, he could be like a 7th-round pick. Like if he runs like a 4.8, he's gonna drop. So I liked him though. Just to say more about his blocking, really good leverage, blocks well on the move. He consistently finished his blocks. The only thing I had with him as a receiver is I thought he was powerful after the catch. Like he did not just get like pushed around by defensive backs or anything like that. But you have anything to add to that, Sal?
He blocks really well.
I agree.
Yeah. I think he's a Chris Myrick prototype, I think he offers a little bit of the passing game. Like you said, he can leak out and be a check down option. I don't think there's much to prove that he has any route running capabilities beyond that. So I think he's an extra blocking tight end. Guys like this are useful. I don't want to poo-poo it. Like you need guys like this on your roster because they're basically like extra offensive linemen, who are eligible receivers. That's what they are. And I think that's useful. So I wouldn't take a guy like this on day 2. I think that if my roster was more complete and I was looking for a guy like this, I might take a swing in the 5th round on a guy like this. I think that's kind of where he lands. But are the Giants in the mood to take a guy like this? I doubt it. I'd be surprised if they drafted this guy.
You'd have to really blow up like a guy like Hayden Hurst is kind of the guy that was really just a blocker in college, and then he tested really well, and he went like 2nd round. I think I'm thinking somebody else, but I think that was the case with Hurst.
All right. Yeah, that's all I got on him, man. Just Mike Varner. I mean AJ Varner.
Let's get into some of the guys who are supposed to block.
Yeah, let's get the guys who get paid to block. So our first guy, you can introduce him.
Yep, we got Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon. He's 6'3", 320 pounds. He was a 4-star center recruit. By a few different places, he was number 1 center recruit, number 2 center recruit. He was like right around there, really highly ranked as far as that goes. But he actually played all over. I mean, people are watching. You can see down there at the bottom left of the screen here. He played right guard in 2022, in addition to playing left guard, center, right guard, right tackle. In 2021, he played right guard, center, left guard. They moved him all over. He's a versatile player. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what you thought about Jackson Powers Johnson, Sal?
I really like this kid, man. I mean, he's a center right now, and I think he's projecting to be a center at the NFL level, just because of all things you mentioned. But like you said, he played a lot of right guard last year, 350 snaps at right guard in 2022, played all over in 2021. And when you watch him on tape, I like the way he plays his game. He plays like an athletic guard is how I would describe it. I mean, he's powerful, he's got burst, he snaps the ball and he's looking for contact. He's trying to maul people. He's always looking for something to do. I just like the fact that he's very active back there. Like you said, I think you mentioned he fires right out of his stance and he gets his hands out there and he lines them up nicely with his hip and he delivers powerful punches, knocks people over. I think he does have he does have the ability to in zone blocking, get to his man, peel off, go to the second level. He has the athleticism to do those things, and I think he does a good job with it. If there's a negative on him, I think we both saw it. He tends to be very upright and he stands up straight. And I feel like at the NFL level, against some of these really, really agile defensive tackles who have great leverage ability, this guy's going to get forklifted. And that's my concern with this game. So I think he's going to have to play a little bit lower to the ground. He's only 6'3", but he like when I was watching him, like, is this guy like 6'6"? Like he stands so tall back there, and I think he needs to have a little bit more bend. But overall, I think he's a versatile interior offensive lineman. I think he can play him at guard, he can play him at center. I think he's going to go high in this class though because of his value as a center.
Yep. Yeah, man, and I agree. I think you could draft him and play him at guard, and he's a really good player. I thought he was good in run protection and in pass protection. The only negatives I kind of really had in him is sometimes it almost like he was doing too much. He can kind of overset, and then when like a stunt came, he was struggling to get back to kind of put a block on this guy. But I mean, the numbers speak for himself as a pass protector. I mean, if you look at it, this year he had 0 sacks, 0 QB hits, 1 hurry. In 2022, he had 0 sacks, 1 hit, 1 hurry. In 2 years, he allowed a total of 3 pressures, and only one of them was a QB hit and 0 sacks. He has a 90.6 pass blocking grade. I'll tell you, as far as like PFF's system goes, like most of these guys who are like highly graded players, like John Michael Schmitz, for example, who's a very highly graded player last year. It's usually because they have a really high run blocking grade. You don't see pass blocking grades like this. I think like Olu has one. But like the 90s is unheard of. Very, very impressive player as a pass blocker. I felt he always kept his body square to the defender. Like there was not there was he wouldn't let guys kind of like take half man on him. He constantly kept himself square and kept himself in front of him. Uh and he had ridiculously strength, especially in run when he's run blocking and good at resetting his hands. He's good hands altogether. Really like him as a player. You nailed a lot of it, but I'm a fan of this kid.
No, he's solid, man. I think he's going to end up going top of the second round. Is my guess. I don't think he's going to last much longer beyond that. Like
I
top,
agree.
I think he's a top 50 pick. So a little rich for my blood for the Giants, but
Yeah,
an interesting
but
prospect.
nonetheless, yeah, definitely.
And the reason I say that honestly is because John Michael Schmitz does not have guard versatility. Like he is a center, you know. And I feel like if you're going to bring a guy whose best attribute is being a center, like that, it's. I think you can go and get a guard of a similar value as a guard for a lesser pick. Is in the way I'm looking at this guy. So I think what makes him a rich pick is his value as a center. So I don't think he's much of a giant.
Agreed. And one thing I will say with to moving him to guard is although I think he's a good enough athlete to play guard or center. I did say that like his anchor, like, I thought could have been better, but it was more inadequate. I'll say it's more inadequate for a center. I don't expect centers to have, like, a crazy anchor, especially against these giants they have to play. At guards, I do expect you to have a little bit more of a I don't know, I see them a little bit more as, like, the maulers than I do from a center.
Yep, I agree. All right, let's go to the next guy.
Alright, well, speaking of big maulers, go ahead
Yeah,
and introduce
I'll
this
introduce
guy.
us. Yeah, I'll introduce you to like a brick wall of a human being. Cooper Beebe from Kansas State, 6'4", 335 pounds. He was a 2022 first team All American. He was a 3-star defensive tackle prospect coming out of high school. He was kind of a multi-sport athlete. He played basketball. He played shot put and track and field. He's played snaps everywhere but center, basically. But tell us about Cooper Beebe, Monty.
Cooper Beebe he's a giant man. He is a refrigerator. He is one of the biggest humans that I've seen. Like he just looks large in the football field. He's got what I wrote down. I went to go right back down again today. But I already had it written down was he grown man strength. Like this is literally what words that pop in my head when I watch him play. He can just push people around and bully them. He finishes blocks. My issue with him though is he has really slow feet. His size shows up in his athleticism. He does not look very athletic. It's funny. I'm looking at his PFF grades right here. He's a 90.5 pass block grade. I was just going on about how like impressive that was. And don't get me wrong, he's a very good pass blocker, right? But like you could then turn around and look at his stats. He let up 1 sack, 0 hits, and 8 hurries this year. It's a lot of hurries, and I saw him, like, it was always just because he wasn't a good enough athlete, and, the game I watched was him versus Texas, and we reviewed this guy during the interior offensive line episode, and I don't think I had a lot of negative things to say about him then, but I think watching him go up against NFL talent this time around, like a guy like uh Byron Murphy, who is ridiculously quick off the snap. I saw him consistently, like, have to take, like, and wash this guy down, and washing a guy when you're playing in the middle of the line is not a great thing. He just didn't have the foot speed to stay in front of this guy, and he was not fast enough off snap. He wasn't quick enough to get in front of him. When he's going up against an elite, like, twitchy defensive tackle, he's gonna struggle, and you're gonna see a lot more of those once you get to the NFL level than you saw in college. So I like Cooper Beebe. You'll see in, like, PFF mocks, he'll be available in the 4th, 5th round. You'd be like, he won't be there. He might. He might be there. He's not a great athlete.
I said this to you before the pod. He's what I imagine Evan Neal looks like at guard.
Yeah.
A big, monster-sized human being, a bit of a lumbering, slow-footed athlete.
Mhm.
Although I think Evan Neal probably has a little bit better at lateral athleticism than this guy does.
Yeah. I mean, like,
Actually, quite
Evan
a bit.
Neal looks slower, like, on the field, but he's definitely a better athlete than Cooper Beebe
Right,
is.
and I'm sure maybe at guard he'll look a lot faster than he
Yeah.
does at tackle.
He might.
But yeah, Cooper Beebe's just big block of a human who's just doesn't move a ton. I think you nailed it. I think the concern is if you're dealing with these one gappers, right? These one gappers who have like quick burst off the snap on the D line, he's actually going to struggle to catch up with them. They'll go right past him. Um, I don't think he has the athleticism to keep up with some of these other guys. I think people are going to love him because he's gonna look like a bully mashing people into the ground. But I don't know about you, man, but I'm personally kind of over it with these type of guys. I think the NFL is a more athletic person's game right now, and I'm more intrigued by linemen who have a lot of functional strength and leverage, who have where they have more lateral agility, mobility. I will take that in a little bit of a lighter frame over these like monster human beings who can't move. So that's kind of where I am with Cooper Beebe. So I thought I'd like him a lot more when I started watching this game. I'm like, I can just see athletic defensive linemen eating this guy's lunch in the NFL. So
Yeah. I saw him, when we reviewed earlier in the year, and I liked him a lot more than I did, but I definitely am lowering him down my board after seeing him go up against some real NFL talent. Um, he's a good player, man. He's a big player. He will not get bull rushed. He will move
yeah,
people in the run game.
you
But
can't go through him. And if he starts getting some momentum, he's gonna create like a path of destruction. It,
yes,
it's and I think that's what people like about him. But it just you know I think there's more to the modern run game than just being like a big, slow moving train. I
yeah.
think I think you have to be a little bit more athletic. So
NFL
I'm not in
defenses are
the
getting too athletic for that.
yeah, it's tough. This is a guy who I can see going high in the draft, but like I don't know where he fits, man. I can actually see with our kind of prehistoric view of offensive line construction on the Giants, I can see us like wanting this guy. I just
Mhm.
don't like. Yeah, like, it's a very limited type of offensive run game design you can do with a guy like this. He's not getting out in space and doing much for you.
I wouldn't touch him before the 3rd.
Yeah, I think I'd avoid him altogether, honestly.
Yeah.
But
Even 3rd feels rich, but I wouldn't
yeah,
touch him before the 3rd. At least where we are. Comp picks, maybe. I would feel better about it.
all right. But that's a nice segue to our final player to discuss today, Monty, which you and I were pleasantly surprised to watch. So tell us about the last guy.
Yep. Christian Haynes out of UConn. Shout out Connecticut. I texted you this guy, just giant, as soon as I started
Yeah,
watching him. Um
I
six
understood.
Yep. Well, all right. So 6'2", 313, 6'3" on Tinder. Two star recruit, 6-year player. He's a former wrestler, which you always love to see with these offensive linemen. He's a 2-time All-American, third team, but still 2-time All-American out of UConn. Right? Now you don't see a lot of those. Tell us about Christian Haynes.
Dude, I love Christian Haynes, and I know you texted me first. I hadn't had a chance to look at his film yet, but then I started watching him, and man, he's impressive. So I think we both watched the 2022 Michigan game
Yep.
um, against a
Shout
stout,
out barrel roll. Do a barrel roll.
yeah, against a stout Michigan defensive line. And Christian Haynes was bullying these men. These were grown men. He was bullying Chris Jenkins. He was bullying Mazzie Smith. He was bullying some of the top defensive linemen in college football and just making them look like they were not worthy of being on the field with him. So what did I see? Exactly what I was just saying I want to see. I saw an athletic lineman. He's not humongous like the last guy, but he's plenty strong, and you see it like these wrestlers, man, they pack a mean punch for a smaller frame sometimes, and that's what you see with Christian Haynes. This guy is right off the snap, he's explosive for a lineman. I think he's very explosive. He latches on, especially in the run game. And like I think you put the note in, I agree with it. He looks like he's trying to push the sled in the run game. Like he latches on and he just starts moving his legs, and his legs they're just driving people backwards with ease. Like with ease, he's plowing a pathway for the play behind him. Um, he has incredible movement skills for a dude his size. He really does. Like he's always moving. He pushes guys backwards, and when he's on zone blocks, he'll go to the first level, finish the combo block, go to the next level very quickly, and he will find the linebacker or the safety on the second level. He'll latch on, and the shit he does to those guys is just terrifying. Like he grabs them. I saw him push somebody back like 15 yards on one play. Like he just keeps going, and there's nothing that poor helpless person can do with it. Um, this guy can play ball, man, and you can see him like. I didn't see him get used a ton on pulls, um, but I can see him being very good with his athleticism and the way he moves. I think this guy's going to be like an elite, like pulling guard, great zone blocker, going to second level, just such good movement skills, strength. He never gets pushed backwards. He's always pushing forward, and he has very good balance. I thought. I know you had concerns about some of his balance. But I thought he was very balanced in his leverage, but that's kind of I was really impressed by this kid. What are your other thoughts on him?
Yeah, man. I loved him. I mean, the first thing that popped off my page of the page to me, as you mentioned, is just like he is a technician as a run blocker. He is doing exactly how you're coached to run blocker. Like he can be an instructional video if you watch him play. He fires out of his stance, brings his hands, follows with his hips, and drives the guy exactly like every O line coach will teach you to do. And because of that, he you do not see this guy go without moving somebody in the run game. He always gets some level of movement. It's extremely impressive. You mentioned a lot of this, but you see some issues with some guys, and when they climb to the next level with either the angles they take or just like getting a hold of these more athletic guys at the second level, and he doesn't struggle with that. He has strong hands, takes the right angles, and works off of combo blocks and gets these guys perfectly. Yeah, I mentioned some. I said balance issues like question mark in my thing because I saw him kind of get knocked over a couple times. I'm not worried about it at all as a run blocker. It was so rare, but the game I watched from him with Michigan, they really didn't pass the ball. I want to go back and watch more Christian Haynes and get an idea of him as a pass protector. Because that's where I'd worry about those issues possibly showing up. But I have to confirm that still. It's just something to keep an eye on. I saw the only other thing I saw like pass protection. Sometimes I felt like he was just kind of standing around instead of like just go and pick somebody and trying to go get work. I'm getting nitpicky with him though. Like I really do like this guy. Could say he's a really good athlete. I actually went and looked up his grade because I didn't check from the Michigan game. Checks out. 82.9, 83.2 run block, 84.7 pass block, and this was against one of the best defensive fronts in the entire country. He said Mozzie Smith, first round pick, Chris Jenkins, future early day 2 pick. So like he is a very good football player who showed up against real competition. Um, you see an 89.2 zone grade, and that's what UConn does. They have like a zone blocking scheme, so it'll be interesting to see what team likes him. You could easily see him fit in like a Shanahan system because of that, especially with his athleticism. As far as pass blocking, he allowed 1 sack, 1 hit, and 9 hurries this year. The year before, though, he let up no sacks, 1 hit, 2 hurries. So definitely struggled a little bit more in pass pro than he did last year. But I like this kid a lot. I would love to draft this guy. I would happily do it on day 2. We took him with like that Seattle second round pick. I wouldn't have a problem with it. I don't even think that's too rich for him. He's flying up my board. I like Christian Haynes a lot. Do you have anything else you want to add about him?
Kind of guy I can see rising up the draft boards the way Zion Johnson did a couple of years ago. He just reminds me of that kind of prototype, you know? I think Johnson had second and third round grades coming into the Senior Bowl, and man, did his stock surge, you know? Because people saw the athleticism, they saw the ability. And I feel like this guy can actually do stuff like that at the Senior Bowl, and you'll see a stock. I think he's going to make a push for a much higher pick after the Senior Bowl. This is a guy who's going to benefit from the Senior Bowl, in my opinion.
Yeah, if we talk about some of the linemen here that we went over about how they might get helped by the Senior Bowl, I think Jackson Powers Johnson's and I think Christian Hayes are 2 guys who can really help themselves out and show how technically sound they are as players and the athletes they are and things like that. Senior Bowl. Cooper Beebe is a guy that we've seen guys like this before go to the Senior Bowl, and they
And they
have a lot of
struggle.
hype. Yep, and then
Yeah.
one-on-ones are tough, man. It's really tough for linemen in general, but especially when you're a big, slower guy. Those are the guys you consistently see struggle at the Senior Bowl, and that hurts them. I think Cooper Beebe will be that. If I'm wrong, hell, maybe his stock will go up because he's got the size. If he can show up at the Senior Bowl, it can help him. I just don't anticipate it from what I saw.
What team is he on?
Cooper Beebe?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kansas State.
No. I mean, at the Senior Bowl.
Oh, yeah, I'm not sure.
Because I'd be curious if he has to line up against Byron Murphy, because I feel like Byron Murphy might be his kryptonite, in a one-on-one rep. But we'll see. Or a guy like Darius Robinson could give him a lot of trouble. But we'll see. I think that these guys how they perform at Senior Bowl for some of these guys is definitely going to, I think, determine how much they go up and down the board.
He's
But
on the
we both,
national team, so he will be on our team. And he's going up against the American defensive line, so he will be going up against Byron Murphy and Darius Robertson
yep. So
and
he's going to get a
Devondre
test.
Sweat.
Now Robinson's more of a power rusher, but still, we saw that he showed some lateral agility, in his reps.
Sweat's a guy he
Certainly,
can handle.
Sweat he can handle. Byron Murphy, though, is very much like that kind of kryptonite one gapper style guy who might give him a lot of trouble.
And
So
McKinley Jackson he has to go against.
okay, so he's got some stout competition.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see it. So I think that kind of wraps it up. That's our 40 players from the Senior Bowl. 20 on offense, 20 on defense. That's a wrap. So man, we have done a ton of prospects. I know there was some overlap, but we did, I don't know how many we did, like 70 or so prospects leading into, when we finished our quarterback edition of prospect reviews. Did another 40 here for the Senior Bowl, albeit a lot faster and more of a of like a condensed type of review, and with some overlap. But that's I think we have enough to make our top 100 board at this point.
Yeah, we're
I
getting
think
there
we
for
got
sure.
yeah, we're gonna get there. So I don't have anything else to add about the Senior Bowl here. It's gonna be starting next week. I believe next week, right? Or
Yeah, next week.
yeah.
Practice will start next
Uh,
week.
Yep. So it'll be fun to watch. There are other bowl games like Shrine Bowl going on, where Mike Kafka is the head coach,
Mhm.
and Hula Bowl. So there's other players to pay attention to. But Senior Bowl is obviously the granddaddy All Star game. Giants World doesn't have a ton of other news going on. We'll wait to see what happens with the coaching carousel, and obviously it's draft season. This concludes our prospect reviews for now. We're probably going to circle back and do some more focused stuff as we get closer to the draft. Um, and we're gonna have some pretty cool content. I can't believe I said that word. We're gonna have some pretty cool shit for you guys. Like we have some cool ideas in the works. Let's just say some collaborative efforts that we're hoping to work on with others and do some cool things leading up to the draft. That's all I have. As always, thank you for your support. Follow us. Follow me at Queens_guy. Follow Monty on X/Twitter at Monte Cristo at MONTECRI5TO. And you can follow us at He's a Giant Pod. You can watch us on YouTube. You can listen to us on Spotify or Apple. Monty, you have any other closing remarks before we shut this one down?
Real quick, did we want to try to touch on some of the offensive just guys to watch from the Senior Bowl list and just name them real quick and not go into
Oh,
them?
sure. Of course. Yeah.
All right, I got it right here, so we'll just kind of fly through them. Let's see. All right, I'll do the offensive line. We'll switch by position group, so I'll just kind of if you and I'll call anybody out if you see it, but I'll lead it for this one.
So ignore my valediction to this episode, and we'll go through this first. And that's fine.
So Fuaga, we talked about Tyler Guyton. We talked about Graham Barton. Definitely should have talked about. He's a guy that he's going to be a stud at the Senior Bowl. He's got a guy that will probably play some center. He's a typical Senior Bowl guy through and through, and he's going to get a lot of love. I guarantee it. Trevor Keegan. He's going to be on the national team. He's a Michigan guy, very good guard. He just missed the list. Definitely somebody I want to look more into. Cooper Beebe, we talked about. Cedric Van Prant was on our interior offensive line episode. Very good center prospect. More of a pure center, but really good. Javion Cohen, he's a good player. Hayes. You have anybody from this list that that I missed you wanted to call out?
I don't think we talked about Jordan Morgan, did we? On
Jordan
the
Morgan.
Senior Bowl, yeah. So Jordan Morgan's a guy we reviewed in the early part of the season with our O-line review. This is the kind of guy we should be looking for the Giants. He's a left tackle at Arizona, really outstanding player, a lot of balance and leverage like a wrestler. I think he has the functional athleticism to play tackle, but a lot of people project him to be able to play guard in the NFL. I think that has a lot of that has to do with wingspan. But somebody to watch. I think he's going to sneak into the first round, but we'll see. I mean, I think he'd be a nice pickup for the Giants. He was there in the second round, and they wanted to go that route. Let's go through this really quickly. Patrick Pauls, I think.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, Patrick Paul's a guy. He's kind of a longer, leaner offensive tackle from Houston. I think he's a pure offensive tackle, somebody we didn't show a ton of interest in, and I think he's had a solid year. So I think he's going to be kind of a second round tackle in this class.
Good pass protector.
Very good pass protector. Going through this list. It's worth mentioning that Roger Rosengarten was on this list. He's the right tackle from Washington who played opposite Troy Fountainoh. Had a solid year in pass protection, not the best in run blocking. For those who remember the national title game, he really struggled against the Michigan edge rushers. So I think he's somebody who a lot of people thought was going to go back to school when he decided to declare for the draft. I think he's probably looking at a day 3 kind of grade right now. He's probably at the Senior Bowl to prove that he's worthy of more. So it's worth watching. He is a right tackle though. So if you're looking for that, I think a lot of people think he can kick inside also as guard. So he kind of fits the profile we're looking at. I just don't think he was as good as some of the other guys, but maybe a flyer on day 3.
One guy I want to shout out here too, West Virginia guy, Zach Frazier. He actually I don't know he got injured at the end of the season in West Virginia. I don't know what he ended up getting, but everything I've heard was that he avoided a serious injury. So I don't know what his participation level is going to be at the Senior Bowl, but he's a guy who's really liked I've heard nothing but good things from like Brugler. From what I saw, he's a very good player. He's a state champion wrestler. Again, something you love to see. He started as actually a guard his freshman year for West Virginia. He was the first offensive line starter we've had as a freshman like 40 years or something like that. So if he's healthy, he could easily go day 2. He might end up beating out Powers Johnson for Central 1. Definitely got to watch.
Absolutely. Getting into the quarterbacks, we went through most of them. I think it's worth mentioning Joe Milton's name. I am definitely not a big believer in Joe Milton, but I know NFL scouts will love the fact that this guy can sling it like 80 yards in the air.
He'll be fun to watch at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, so we'll see if he can raise his stock. Not the most accurate passer. Going down the list, I think in the running back room, Sam Hartman's worth mentioning. Absolutely, the Notre Dame quarterback. Really solid game manager type. Really, really smart quarterback, very seasoned, and I think the kind of guy who's going to have a long NFL career. He's going to come in.
He's the type of guy. He's the type of guy like day 3. People have Brock Purdy on their mind when they're looking at Sam Hartman.
Yeah, smart, good processor, good decision maker. Nothing elite, but just a good football player.
Lots of playing experience.
Yep, absolutely. He's kind of like the DTR of this class. He's very much like that guy. Let's see. Going through the running backs. Let me see if anybody excites me on this list. I think we've gone through some of the guys we already like.
Jalen Wright from Tennessee is a guy to keep an eye on. I've heard good things about him.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. But your boy Ben Sinnott.
All right, tight end. Let's go.
Yeah.
Ben Sinnott. The Giants are going to have to draft Ben Sinnott because he's going to be the most amazing player in this draft. What a sleeper. Ben Sinnott won Fullback of the Year award. He's a tight end. He's a very good route runner as a tight end. He was a 0-star recruit. He's a very, very good route runner. He's a good blocker. He has a pretty diverse route tree. He's a reliable pass receiver. He gets a lot of yak. Just a damn good player. Very much in the mold of I imagine Daniel Bellinger with a more refined route running tree. I think that's kind of the player he is. But hey, man, I would not be upset with the 2 tight end sets of this guy and Daniel Bellinger if we decide to move on from Darren Waller. I think there's a lot of value in having guys like this on your roster playing that fullback / role, tight end role. Who else? Let's go.
Brevin Spanford. I've heard good things about out of Minnesota, tight end.
Yep. Going into the wide receivers, we went through a lot of these guys already. Who did we miss here? Ricky Pearsall's a guy we failed to discuss when we were talking about. Just missed. Solid receiver from Florida. Was a favorite target of Anthony Richardson last year. Still productive this year. I think he's somebody to watch. He might do a pretty good job. Johnny Wilson.
Good route runner.
Good route runner. Johnny Wilson's the huge. Oh, go ahead. Finish.
And he made that crazy catch this year. He made that like OBJ type catch for Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Johnny Wilson is a 6'7" monster receiver from Florida State, who is Darren Waller size, but he has the athletic ability to stay on the outside. I think he's going to be. A lot of teams are going to like this guy, man, just because of that unique size and frame. Like, if he can run routes, he can get down the field. He's got pretty decent juice to him. There's not a ton else there. Like, he's not going to run away from people, but what a target at that size. If you can get the ball to him, I think he's a real threat, and I think teams are going to fall in love with him.
I'll be curious if they ask him to play any tight end at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, I think he's a wide receiver, though. I really do.
I'm just curious if they ask him to do it.
Yeah. Brendan Rice, the son of Jerry Rice, was one of the lead receivers at USC with Caleb Williams this year. He's just a kind of a solid receiver. I was never wowed by him, to be honest. We'll see what he does. Where are we now? We're down to the last few receivers, and Luke McCaffrey.
Yeah, that's one other guy I wanted to throw out there. Luke McCaffrey. He the brother of Christian McCaffrey, and he was actually a former quarterback, and he recently He transferred from Nebraska and went to Rice, and he's really recently switched to wide receiver, and he had a really good year this year. There he and his father Ed McCaffrey, great NFL wide receiver. It'll be interesting. I think he's a guy who might get some love. I mean, that's an athletic family. He's got NFL bloodlines. I know the wide receiver is still somewhat of a new thing to him because he's a quarterback, but I definitely interested in seeing him at the Senior Bowl. It's definitely something I was interested in looking at, and I still will at some point. But I think that's it,
Dad
right?
was a Giant, and McCaffrey.
Yeah.
He started his career on the Giants for one of the 49ers. No, I think that's it. That's the whole list. So, pay attention to the game. For those who don't know, the Senior Bowl is mostly about the days leading up to the game. The game is the least interesting part of the whole week. The whole week they have different drills. They have, the one-on-ones. They have all sorts of testing stuff. It's a good way to get to know these players, and you learn a lot about them. So for those who are getting interested in the prospect evaluation process, just watch every day. Come home from work or school, whatever you guys are doing, and pay attention to the Senior Bowl stuff. It's really interesting, and you get to know a lot of these prospects. It'll help you get a better understanding of the draft board as it plays out. Now, do you have anything else?
That's all I have now.
I'm not doing that whole goodbye speech again. We are done. Thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you next week. Go Giants.
Go Giants.